It's time to learn a new mood. We've studied two moods already, the indicative mood and the imperative mood. After the indicative mood, the most frequently used mood in the Greek New Testament is the subjunctive mood. Now we're going to talk about the various uses of the subjunctive in the next lesson. But in short, this is the mood of possibility. This is a mood that expresses some sort of future possibility or some sort of future wish or question, and sometimes an imperative, a command, that sort of thing. It has a variety of uses, which we will see very soon. Let's look at the forms. The forms are quite straightforward once we realize that the vowel in the personal endings has been lengthened. So you recall from the indicative forms we have luo, lues, lue, etc. The omega stays the same, so these forms are the same for the subjunctive and the indicative first person singular. But the ace of the indicative form with the epsilon iota has been lengthened to become eta with the iota subscript. Same with the third person singular form, the epsilon iota has been lengthened to become eta with a iota subscript. Moving on down, we have the first person plural, the omen with the omicron in the indicative is lengthened to an omega. The epsilon in the second person plural is lengthened to an eta. And the sin of the indicative form in the third plural is lengthened to an omega. So these are the present active subjunctive forms. They're quite straightforward to learn as long as you remember that rule of lengthening the vowel in the personal endings. The same rule applies in the middle passive forms. And instead of lu-o-me with the omicron becomes o with the omega in the first singular. So we'll just work through these forms. Lu-o-mai, lu-e, lu-etai, lu-ometha, lu-esthe, lu-ontai, or with the modern pronunciation, liome, lii, liete, liometha, liesthe, lionte. Now these forms need to be learned, they need to be memorized, but as I mentioned, they're fairly straightforward once you see the pattern of formation. Moving on to the aorist subjunctive of luo. These are formed in a very straightforward fashion as well. With the active and middle forms, all that's involved is taking the forms that we've just seen, these present subjunctive forms, active and middle passive, and supplying a sigma before those subjunctive endings. And so for the active forms we see luso, luses, luse, lusomen, lusete, lusosin, or liso, lysis, lissi, lisomen, lisite, lisosin. For the middle forms, lusomai, luse, lusetai, lusometha, lusesthe, lusontai, or lisome, lissi, lisite, lisometha, lisesthe, lisonte. Now, with the passive forms, instead of a sigma, we take the active form for the present and simply supply a theta before the personal endings. Or another way to think of it is to look at the aorist active forms and replace the sigma with a theta. Either way, these are formed in a very straightforward fashion. So we have lutho, luthes, luther, luthomen, lutheta, luthosin, or litho, lithis, lithi, lithomen, lithiti, and lithosin. So that gives us all the present and aorist subjunctive forms in all the voices. Easy to form, and really you've just learnt a whole new mood. Now there's one other table to look at here, and this is the subjunctive forms for a me. We've seen before that a me does its own thing, but because it's such an important verb in the Greek New Testament, we need to study its own table in a sense. What we see here is omega is the first person singular form. Es, omen, eta, osin, or o, is, I, omen, ite, osen. Now, these are easily learned if you simply look back to the present active subjunctive forms that we've just learned at the beginning of this lesson and take the endings of those forms. The personal endings will form the subjunctive of me with the addition of a circumflex over each word. So the forms for the subjunctive are quite straightforward. The uses of the subjunctive are a little more complicated, and that's what we'll be looking at in the next lesson.